first thing I'm going to say is this topic is huge because it goes
Right.
back centuries into many centuries into human history. It goes back at least to the beginning of written history. So that's a long time. Werewolves have been with us since the beginning of people using written language. And not just werewolves, but other werebeasts as well, I should not neglect to say, because other parts of the world have different werebeasts than Europe and the Americas.
Generation X Paranormal. Well, hey everybody, welcome back.
Hey everybody.
We're Generation X Paranormal. I'm Logan.
I'm Nicole.
You know, we were watching that YouTube of that guy who does the carpet cleaning, the dirt and does all that.
You were watching.
Okay, I was watching it. You were being tortured with it.
Yes.
But I got to wonder, how many carpets does this guy have? I mean, it's not like there's an endless supply of carpets like that.
We're going to talk about carpets.
No, probably not. Anyway, hey, so we have a very special guest, and we have Rissa, and Rissa's back. She's been with us many times, and we'll keep bringing her back, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But
we love her.
We do love Rissa, and Nicole, what can you tell us more about Rissa?
So if you don't know who she is,
That's right.
Rissa Miller is an editor, author, herbalist, seer, and storyteller. Her storytelling expertise stems from extensive research into the area of esoteric history, including ghosts, witchcraft, cryptids, and folklore. And you can find her website at www.teandsmoke.com.
Yep, good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And without further ado, let's bring Rissa on.
Well, what are we going to talk about?
Oh, yeah, that's kind of important. We're going to talk about werewolves.
Carpets.
Dirty carpets and werewolves. That should be the title of the show.
Well, they should go hand in hand.
Dirty carpets and werewolves. No, it's going to be awesome. She's got some, I know she's got some great stuff ready for us on wolf folklore and werewolves and all kinds of wolves.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and how they can make your carpets dirty. Apparently.
Right now, come on. That was good stuff, right? Anyway, let's talk to Rissa.
Whatever you say. Let's talk to Rissa.
Hey, Rissa, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back. I'm so pleased to be here.
That's awesome. It's funny. We talked just before we got started. I think we're going to officially name you our resident historian for Generation X Paranormal.
Absolutely.
I am honored and privileged, and I'm happy to accept the title.
Awesome. So, yeah. It's always exciting to talk to you. You come with so much great information.
Mm-hmm.
The topic that we're talking about today, I got to be honest with you. My first introduction to it, probably for folks my age, was like American Werewolf in London, and it absolutely petrified me for the rest of my life. Because let me tell you something. I just watched that movie, I think maybe about a month ago, and it so totally still holds up because it is still scary.
I would never watch it.
Oh,
I watch the fun ones like Michael J. Fox.
yeah.
Teen Wolf.
Yeah, Teen Wolf.
But kind of on that, we're going to talk about some werewolf stuff, and I'm pretty excited about that. I
don't know anything about
I'm
it.
sure there's probably a whole host of things I am completely oblivious about. So, what can you tell us about the hairy people?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is this topic is huge because it goes back centuries into many centuries into human history. It goes back at least to the beginning of written history. So that's a long time. Werewolves have been with us since the beginning of people using written language. And not just werewolves, but other werebeasts as well, I should not neglect to say, because other parts of the world have different werebeasts than Europe and the Americas. So that said, there's way more of this than I could fit into an hour. I think I could literally teach a semester-long course on just werewolves and history. Never mind werewolves and literature or werewolves and movies, comics, role-playing games, all of that. They are a huge part of humanity's story, so to speak. And, I kind of want to circle around though and begin with actual stories of encounters that I've collected, if that's okay.
Please,
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
So, many Americans, and according to u.gov, it's 1/3 to 1/2 of Americans say that they have experienced something that falls into the category of supernatural in their life, whether it's UFOs or cryptids or ghosts or werewolves. That means maybe up to half, but at least 1/3 of everyone living in the United States has had a supernatural experience. For me, I am always open to listen. I know that people know what they saw, heard, felt, experienced, and I never doubt that. And over time, I have collected some stories of people who encountered a werewolf or something that looked like one. Because there's another creature, I'm sure you know it, that looks like a werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
So the first story I'll share came to me from a woman in Maryland who has a PhD in top secret clearance. She said I must never use her name because of what she does for a living, but her world was rocked by the experience of seeing what she thought was a werewolf. Now, it was the daytime of a full moon, and her and a girlfriend were hiking in a very big park in Maryland called Patapsco. They knew that somebody was following them, and their true fear as women was that it was a human. That's what I'm sure, Nicole, that you can relate to this, and
Yes,
maybe even you to a
absolutely.
certain extent, Logan.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Fear the humans,
yeah.
but
Scarier than anything.
yes, truly. And then they realized that they could hear like soft growling and what sounded like paws, not shoes, hitting the ground. And they both turned and saw something that looked like a upright dog, but way taller, like 7 or 8 feet. Because they knew it was a full moon, they both immediately said werewolf. So the one of the two that I interviewed said they didn't know if they should run because they knew they could not outrun it. And they said they just walked quickly to their car, got in, locked the door, turned on the engine, and then right as they did that and they were backing out, that they saw it walk to the edge of the tree line. It was huge. It had dark fur. And the one distinct thing that they said made them believe it was a werewolf after looking at tons of illustrations and drawings and websites was the fact of its body shape was different and its eyes looked menacing. So their questions were things like, why didn't it just take us? Why was it following?
Right.
What did it want? And of course, as I was chatting with her, I couldn't answer that. I had no idea. But it was the first werewolf witness I had ever experienced. And the next one came last year after I gave a cryptid talk in Pennsylvania. A woman walked up to me and said, of course, I must never share her name, but she was driving on a country road going to visit her mom. She didn't want to take the highway. She decided to take a shortcut, or a long cut, probably the scenic route, not driving on the highway. And a huge bipedal creature that looked like an upright gray wolf walked out in front of her. She almost hit it. She said that she slammed on the brakes and just sat there, and it turned and made eye contact with her, and it had yellow eyes. It stared right into her window. She said that it was really tall and less than 7 feet from her. Like, it was very close. And she said she knew it was not a costume. She knew that it was not made of plastic or makeup.
Right.
She could see it breathing. She could see the definition of its muscles and that its claws were like by its hands. She said after they made eye contact for a few seconds, it turned and ran, but it ran on all fours.
That's it. Yeah. For some reason, I keep thinking about. First of all, it cracks me up because I think about Dustin Hoffman going, "I'm walking here" when he's. Anyway, you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
I do.
I'm walking here. So anyway, for it to acknowledge, to make eye contact,
Yeah.
I know that,
Obviously not scared either.
right, and
No.
not just that, but and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more. But typically, whenever I've seen werewolves in the past, now granted, I know most of it's Hollywoodized, but you always figure that the person, once they metamorphosize or change into the wolf or whatever being it is, kind of loses I wouldn't say like sentient because it's obviously still alive, but it's not as
Humanity.
right, the humanity. So for it to lock eyes, that kind of really kind of already dispels a few things that I had thought of in the past.
So we're going to talk about that because there are even historically and throughout lore, there are different ways that people have written and experienced werewolves and werewolf type creatures. And the werewolf type creatures I'm talking about are the dogman, but I'm going to come back to that in a minute.
Yep.
So when I spoke to both of these women and I saw their hesitancy to even tell me that neither of them would share their name. They were worried about their jobs. They didn't want anybody to know they'd had this experience. The first thing that struck me was we have this long history with the werewolf, and it's been part of humanity since the beginning of humanity, right? Basically, it's where creatures exist on every place on Earth that's inhabited, basically. Shapeshifters. So why the stigma attached? So I feel like the thing about werewolves is that we've been taught that they're monsters of folklore. And I love folklore. I think it's one of the most fascinating parts of history because it's kind of the why behind history. You know, the belief behind history, the customs, the stories, the communities that create like the pieces that fill in around the bones when it comes to history, the traditions, you know, the stuff that is real life. You know, I could sit here and talk about history and spout facts and book titles and things, and it would be super boring without the folklore, without those other pieces. And we have always been taught that monsters are folklore. We are told, as historians, we're taught that monsters embody the fear of humans, the anxieties of a society. But they're also a fundamental part of what it means to be human. They've served so many purposes in history and in storytelling. They enforce ethics. They teach discipline. They warn us of dangers, like really good dangers, like don't go in the river or wander into the forest by yourself. Like those are important lessons.
Yes,
absolutely. Especially historically or even today, that those things are still relevant. And you know, these creatures represent the unknown, and some of them, like, you know, the vampire would represent eventual death. So throughout history, there are all of these monsters, and monsters do tend to come and go, except a few. And this is probably one of the oldest. So, like I said, vampires, werewolves, witches, these are probably our oldest monsters. Now, we already talked about witches on your show. Witches were and are and always have been real 100%. Vampires we'll have to save for another day.
Actually, we did do vampires.
Did you?
I thought we did vampires for
No, we haven't.
We haven't done vampires yet?
We have not.
Okay.
I think we were thinking about it, but we have not yet done it.
We did talk about the Calicantaros, the Christmas vampires, on the holiday
that's what
episode.
you're thinking of.
So,
right. Well, I'm glad I got you guys around because I'd be lost.
I mean, what's really festive, you know, besides a jolly Christmas vampire?
Vampire, right?
Ho ho, ouch.
Yeah. But luckily, you have to keep in mind the Calicantaros can be distracted by hanging sausages at your door. So
okay,
don't forget.
I'll have to make sure our dogs don't get them.
Yep, they wouldn't last very long.
Yeah, that could be problematic, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go back to the monsters topic. We like to categorize monsters when we're talking about literature and history. So there's the monster from nature. So this is like Sasquatch or the Loch Ness monster, or going back even further, I could say the dragon.
Yeah.
This is the fear that nature will take her revenge for our transgressions against her, which is reasonable.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Next is the monster associated with science. So think Frankenstein. Think anything radioactive. You know, in Pennsylvania, we had 3 Mile Island meltdown, and suddenly there were all these stories of radioactive frogs that were like bigger than me. And as a kid, I thought that was terrifying because it seemed real. But that is a monster of science. P.S. I don't think they ever found a frog bigger than me here in Pennsylvania. So then there's the monster from the past, something that arrives and sort of takes its revenge against progress. And that could be like a mummy or a vampire. And then the final category of monster where we'll sit tonight is the doppelganger, the monster that can hide in plain sight. This includes shapeshifters and werewolves.
Okay.
So werewolves come from a real part of history, actual wolves, right?
Right.
Wolves used to be the most common land mammal in Europe and North America. That's not where we are anymore. They're actually endangered today because so many people were paid a lot of money to kill them because they were they did terrorize people, but they mostly would eat things like sheep, goats, chickens that people needed. So there are still gray wolf populations, just as a point of interest, in Alaska, Michigan, Wisconsin, Montana, Idaho, Oregon, and the Yellowstone area of Wyoming. But that's it. There's nowhere else in the United States that you are going to run into wolves. They think the National Wildlife Federation thinks there are only about 200,000 to 250,000 gray wolves left alive in North America.
Wow.
It's sad.
It is really sad, and it is absolutely illegal to hunt for a wolf in the United States, just so that everybody's on the same page. But this is part of the origin story of why people were afraid of werewolves, or potentially still afraid of werewolves. A werewolf isn't quite the same. Central to the werewolf legend is the shapeshifting. They're going from a human form to a wolf, 4 feet, or a wolf hybrid, which is 2 feet. Is it bipedal or bipedal? I've heard it said both.
Bipedal.
I've heard it said
We've
both
always
ways.
said bipedal. Yeah.
Okay, then I'm going to say it
Go
that way.
bipedal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I've heard it both ways, and I just don't know. So yes,
No.
bipedal. So this is usually a temporary transformation. It can be willing or involuntary, and it usually reverts back to its human form after a certain period of time. Sometimes a night, sometimes several days. Or sometimes there has to be a specific magical trigger. So the other thing that makes the werewolf so sympathetic is the painful transformation. The breaking of bones, the growing of fur and claws and fangs, and then the retraction of those things at the reversal. This is always portrayed in, well, currently in like movies or shows. Like think of the recent Wednesday with with who was the girl's name who was Wednesday's roommate when she transforms into a werewolf.
Yes.
Yeah. What? I remember.
I don't know her.
For whatever reason,
Forgot it.
I'm blanking on it right now, but I can visualize it in my mind when she like drops to the ground and like her bones start breaking. And there were great examples of this as well in the series, the originals with the vampires and the werewolves and the witches set in New Orleans. They did a really masterful job of portraying the pain of the werewolf.
Yeah. I mean, even going back to the movie we talked about when I first started, American Werewolf in London, when he transforms, it is the most brutal thing that I think, well, first of all, I probably shouldn't have seen as a kid, but it is. Yeah, I mean, you can tell they're portraying it being an absolutely excruciating transformation.
Yeah.
Oh, I think one of the hallmarks of Gen X is seeing inappropriate movies too early and reading inappropriate books too soon.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, I
and,
was in
I'm
fifth grade when I
definitely
got Christine by Stephen King. So,
Oh, nice.
Unfortunately, the younger version is going to associate werewolves with the Twilight movies, and
Oh,
Yeah.
there wasn't. Their clothes kind of exploded, but that's about it.
Don't get me started on that.
yeah, this is one part of this I didn't include, but there's a lot of, in American, Native American lore, there's a lot of stories about wolves, and so many of the werewolf stories that came out of America, including Twilight, include like kind of racist depictions of werewolves and Native people. And that's kind of become a huge trope in the entertainment industry. So, like I said, I didn't actually research or make notes on that. I'm completely aware of it, but I didn't include it today. There's that, like, it could be a whole semester thing. But
Right.
I think it's good that you brought that up because it should be acknowledged.
Yeah, I agree.
So, how someone becomes a werewolf? There are so many ways. There are so many ways. There could be a curse. It could be cast by some other person, like a witch or a demon or the devil. Or some people can curse themselves to be a werewolf in certain tellings. The condition can be passed through bloodlines. That's one that you see a lot as far as stories. It could be attached to a pelt or a belt or a girdle. And for those of your listeners who don't know what a girdle is, imagine like shapewear from the past.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
as comfortable.
Yeah, it's not quite like a corset, but it's not as comfy as shapewear. Yeah, let's leave it there.
Yeah.
But yes, there are a lot of werewolf stories associated with girdles. As I researched that, I was like, that's just so odd.
That is a very odd, yeah.
I would have never put that together.
No. Mm-mm.
Well, now you know.
Yeah.
And then there are werewolf stories associated with puddles. There are stories from certain parts of Europe where if you drink from the puddle of the foot of a wolf, you will become a werewolf. And I don't know how common of a problem it was to be drinking from a wolf's
Puddles
foot.
from their feet.
Yeah.
I mean, I would venture to say that after the first time, someone said, let's not do that again, for it to be an actual problem.
Seriously.
That's interesting.
I mean, first of all, the drinking from a puddle from the foot of a werewolf. Or a
No,
wolf.
a regular wolf.
A regular wolf, sorry.
Yeah.
If you're that desperate for water.
Well, I mean,
I mean,
they didn't
I
have
guess.
cars. They were traveling by foot a lot of the time. Maybe that was the only thing that captured the water if they weren't close to a lake or, stream.
Drink some
Maybe it was the only option for water.
Yeah, drink some foot water. That'll fix everything.
Well, there's also, I know we talked about this before, but the story that if you're born on Christmas Day, you'll be a werewolf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember that.
So yeah, there's so many origin stories, and every historian who's been involved with the werewolf story research will tell you there is no one beginning. That this is such an old story that literally nobody knows where it started. Nobody knows what continent it started on, and nobody knows when. So that's kind of a wild thing to think that this story is so old it's lost to history.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, of course, the most common trigger for a werewolf to change is the full moon.
Right.
And it can, in some tellings, be voluntary, and in other tellings, be triggered by a particular kind of magic. Do you know what a witch's flying ointment is when I say that?
No.
No.
Okay. So, they're still around, but historically speaking, it was like a lotion-y type thing, but thicker probably, and it was used to create the ability to fly in witches. Now, did they really fly, or did they hallucinate? Because it was made from things like wolfsbane. We'll come back to that.
Okay.
Or datura, or belladonna. And you're rubbing it
Okay.
on either your mucous membranes or your genitals. So
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
this could also be used, ointments like this, to do your werewolf transformation. So
Okay.
were they
Good
hallucinating, or
Yes.
was it a magical trigger? We'll never know.
Right. Wow.
I just think, I mean, first of all, they're high as hell. I'm sorry. It's just my opinion on that. Not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying that I'm gotta think. And I mean, rubbing that on your nethers, that's taking quite the leap there.
And I would imagine that different people have different levels of sensitivity to poison, literal
Oh, yeah.
poison.
Exactly. Yeah.
Absolutely.
I don't know if people could have perished or become extremely ill. I imagine now with what we know about botany in the modern world that for example, I know that you can make medicine that helps with heart conditions from belladonna, which is
Yes.
deadly nightshade for those who don't know.
Right.
And that said, not everybody does that. I mean, I have herbalist training. I'm a member of the American Herbalist Guild, but I would not make that and give it to someone. I just wouldn't feel okay with it.
Right.
That's the work of a master herbalist,
Mhm.
It's accepting a lot of possible liability. Not only the
Yes.
fact that you're giving them something that is known to be lethal.
Yes.
So
Well, and I'm just thinking of in some medications, some like that, if they get convulsions
Yeah.
from getting near death, that would be mimicking turning into a werewolf, and maybe in their
Yes.
mind, that's what they're remembering. They're thinking is happening, but they're actually just convulsing.
interesting.
Or maybe
Yeah.
the picture in their mind was a hallucination while their body
Yeah.
was going through some other total experience.
Exactly.
There's all
You
the
try to
theories.
rationalize.
Yeah.
You try to rationalize what's happening in the moment, but you're not.
Yeah. I just the idea of
Oh,
sitting
that's
around
interesting.
rubbing it on my genitals is
That's
something that I mean,
Well, no one needs to think about that.
hey, now come on. Jeez.
Well, let's get back to werewolves.
Anyways.
Let's be focused.
Back to werewolves.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the nature of the werewolf. They are typically portrayed as violent predators. They are uncontrollable. They have aggression. They're known for bloodlust, right? But then there's always the question of whether or not they retain their humanity or their consciousness. And I think, Logan, you were touching on this a little bit ago. So the question will always be, are they aware of what they're doing or not? And in different stories, different tellings, different people's experiences, that's always different. And, I kind of have always wondered, is it like, there's stories with ghosts that seem to be completely aware. And I'm talking about the intelligent spirits right now. And then others that seem to be unaware.
Right.
And some people say is how long they have been a ghost or how much energy they've accumulated as a ghost. Could it be the same? Could like a more experienced werewolf have more consciousness? Or are they just always mindless killers? Because wolves themselves are extremely intelligent and they have a lot of consciousness. They are extremely smart and they are great at teamwork. So by that thought, why wouldn't a werewolf, which is a wolf-human hybrid, have some of the same characteristics? I don't know.
Yeah, that's
a good point.
That's a good point, and you always think you're right. You look at the classic, I guess. I mean, well, I'm sure we covered that, but you always think of the werewolf when they change, they're just a beast. They're just out there killing without any reproach. It's just they keep going. But yeah, it would be interesting to know that. That seems like, I would think that maybe the longer you are, I mean, why wouldn't you? If you gain some experience.
Well, it sounds similar to me of like, the vampire lore too. Like when they first change, they're bloodthirsty.
Right.
And then over time, like the older vampires know how to control it. And
yeah.
It
and
sounds
how to
very
exist
similar.
With people.
Yes.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So I mean, this is a my theory.
Yes.
Like as I've been doing this research, I'm like, but if this, then this. And also, if wolves are so smart, then why wouldn't werewolves also retain their intelligence?
Sure.
Exactly.
So,
and even saying that, if you just look at the gray matter itself, a human has a larger brain. That's maybe, they say you only use a certain amount of it anyway. But if there's a bigger brain, there may be a better capacity for learning and doing things. So when they would change into a werewolf, I mean, being able to keep some of that same physicality with the with brain size, I mean, maybe they're just really super intelligent too. I don't know.
Yeah, we won't ever know.
Yeah.
yeah,
The way you're looking at
won't.
me makes me think you're looking at my brain, wondering
where you're going with this.
Well,
So I did want to just briefly note that there are a lot of different varieties of werewolf stories. There's the sympathetic werewolf, who's the victim, right?
Right.
The wolf that is turned against their will. There is the violent wolf who's being punished. Someone who, like one of the stories we'll have coming up, I'll point it out again. Someone who was turned because they were bad to begin with. The warrior wolf, and the classic example of this is the Viking Berserkers. And then, of course, the werewolf lover, like Twilight.
Right.
So these are like the main categories within the werewolf, pantheon. There are other smaller ones as well. But, I grew up, of course, thinking of the werewolf lover because that was the main theme of most of the werewolf stories I saw growing up or read. But,
yeah, I remember that, like Wolfen and stuff like that. Yeah, I remember all those. Yeah.
Exactly. So all creatures have vulnerabilities, and werewolves are no exception. Most people know about silver bullets, and I'm going to circle back. But we're going to go back to an older one first, which is wolfsbane, which is actually a gorgeous flowering plant. It's sometimes also called monkshood. It's in the same flower family as ranunculus, and I think they're actually beautiful. So it is a poisonous plant. If you grow wolfsbane, don't eat it, please. Full stop.
PSA, don't eat it.
Yeah. It was used to both ward off werewolves and also believed to cause people to become werewolves historically. Now,
Hmm.
it was also used to poison real wolves that threatened livestock, which is where it got its
Okay.
name.
Okay.
So, as
I didn't know
protection
that.
against werewolves, you could plant it around your home. You could plant it around your livestock's fields. Hopefully, your livestock doesn't eat it. The plant is
Exactly.
toxic and will kill them too. Um, but it was believed that having a good crop of it growing would protect you, your family, and your livestock. But in the other flip side of the werewolf lore, it's said to trigger a transformation of a person into a werewolf. And that if you consumed it and were poisoned of it with it, it would make you become a werewolf.
Okay.
Or in my scientific knowledge, it could also cause you to die.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to what Nicole was saying. If you're consuming wolfsbane and you're right at the edge of death and you're convulsing and doing all these things.
Well, and like I'm thinking about like someone on the outside watching this happen.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Well,
watching
yeah,
them
because we didn't have
convulse and,
a
like,
good
they're-
understanding of that, historically speaking.
Right.
Back in the day, they would have been like, oh, it must be the devil.
Yes,
Right.
exactly.
Hints of Salem in there.
Well, we'll get to that. The werewolf hunts happened.
Yeah.
Wolfsbane was also made into a poison that was put on the arrow tips that was
Okay.
used to hunt actual wolves and werewolves. So, just as a fun side note, in Harry Potter, Wolfsbane was for Professor Lupin to control his ability to turn. If he
I
didn't take his
remember that.
Wolfsbane potion, he would turn. And of course,
Okay.
he always forgets at the most inopportune moment.
Yeah. Now that's starting to ring a bell. I remember that now.
I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hmm.
So, moving right along, I already talked about that. I want to clear up a little bit of difference between werewolves and dogmen. They do
Okay.
have a lot of similarities, but there are really key differences. They are both canine bipedal creatures, but they sometimes are both seen on four legs as well. And in all honesty, I haven't personally witnessed either one. So I don't know how you could tell them apart by looks. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
One of the biggest differences is the werewolves date back to at least 2000 BC. They have been part of humanity's story forever, and they are also influenced by external forces like the moon. Dogmen are a more modern story. They started in North America, and they aren't considered, they don't change, right? They're always a dogman.
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
From what I could, or a dog woman, I don't mean to be sexist. The story started in, I believe, Michigan in the 1880s. And as far as the physical state, I've been looking to see if there's anything that makes them look different. So I have read a lot of similar descriptions of both, but I think the transformation is the biggest difference for me personally.
Right.
They say that the dogmen sightings tend not to be as aggressive as werewolf sightings.
Okay.
Which makes me wonder, with both of the stories that were conveyed to me, was it a dogman or was it a werewolf?
Right. Because if you weren't there to watch the actual change, then you
How
really
would you know?
wouldn't know.
You would have
you
no
wouldn't.
idea. No idea. So werewolves are said to eat people and animals, including livestock. From what I have read, dogmen tend not to eat people. They tend to eat large game, like deer. And there are a lot of stories of people watching dogmen hunt and eat deer and other large game. So I haven't read a lot of accounts about werewolves doing that. But it also seems to me dogmen would have a lot more opportunity to get seen because they're always dogmen. Whereas werewolves, if they're only changing for a day or 2 or 3 days around the full moon, that's a lot less time.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we did do we covered the Michigan Dogman, and there's
I
a
thought
bit
you
of
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
there was a bit of lore behind that too, where some believe kind of similar to Bigfoot, that there's some interdimensional capabilities
Travel
and things
stuff
like
with
that.
that,
So,
yeah.
but again, this is all
But description, I mean, it's the same.
description wise. No, you're
That's the
right.
thing. I don't know how you would tell.
Yeah, unless
don't
you
know either.
watch the change. Yeah.
Exactly. So the other thing I thought about, werewolves would be sensitive to wolfsbane, but I don't know about a dogman. But if they are in fact a biological creature, I would imagine they would be affected by a poison in the same way.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, like you
Yeah.
could certainly kill a dog with one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that one account, remember, the guy shot it
Yeah.
and it supposedly died, so
Right.
it can die.
Right. So I just wonder if it's a matter of, I guess amount versus pounds and, those sort of things. So
Yeah.
if it's a huge dog man, maybe it's not the same, maybe you just get it sick. I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of, but you're right. So
Variables.
you're not supposed to put dog's bane around livestock because if they eat it, they can die. So if it's a living, breathing creature, then I would assume that's correct. I would think it would.
Yeah, I
be able
mean,
to die.
so I'm a very logical thinker. So to me,
Yeah.
that makes sense. And whether you
For
shoot
sure.
something with a silver bullet or a regular bullet
Regular bullet, yeah.
would
Right.
probably do the job. Now,
Yeah.
Mhm.
the werewolf definitely has a supernatural component with the change that the dogman doesn't. You know, the
Exactly.
dogman,
Yeah.
I'm like, could be a biological entity.
Mhm.
The werewolf has a magic to it.
Right.
So again, those are
Yeah.
the big differences I see. But since I'm talking about silver bullets, let's go there.
Okay.
So the silver bullet is a relatively modern addition to the werewolf story, and it blends superstition and storytelling. So let me back it up. Werewolves are really associated during European history with evildoers and witchcraft, and silver was considered pure. This is going to go back into the idea of alchemy. Alchemy was considered a science where they were trying to make gold, right?
Yes.
So silver was associated with purity, protection, and mystical power. And it was considered a literal pure metal that was associated with the power of the moon. Now, silver has other places in folklore. Silver could kill a witch as well, which is kind of one of the first places silver takes its seat in folklore. But then the vampires. Mirrors were made of silver. That's why a vampire couldn't see themselves in it.
Okay.
So historically, only the very rich would have had a mirror,
Yeah.
which is where the vampire would have wanted to be, right? Among the,
Right,
the
exactly.
posh bougie types.
Right.
And I mean, you never hear about vampires striking the poverty-stricken village.
No.
That's true.
You don't.
They never seem to want to hunt there, you know? I mean,
And you'd figure that'd be an easier prey, I guess. I don't know.
It would definitely be an easier prey, and
Yeah.
I'm here to tell you that even today, crimes against poor people are simply not investigated in the same way as crimes against rich people.
No, they're not.
That
That
is
is
Because
correct.
rich people have means to hire special private investigators and extra lawyers and things like that that middle class and less fortunate people just simply don't have,
No, it's a
Right.
joy of resources.
right?
I wouldn't know what that's like, so yeah.
I get it. So that said, silver made mirrors. To have silver bullets, first of all, meant you were very rich. And the other thing to say is that it is in many ways just a weapon against the supernatural. Silver is a weapon against Satan because it is pure. And the very first notation of silver bullets being used was around 1764. And that's pretty recent in the
Yeah.
werewolf pantheon.
Sure.
And it comes from France, where a man named Jean Chastel was using silver bullets to hunt a large, fierce, wolf-like creature that was terrorizing the Gavaudian region of France. Allegedly, he kills it. It was believed to be a werewolf. I can't find any historical records of what happened to the creature.
Of course.
Shocking, no
That's
one.
convenient, isn't
Yeah.
it?
And
Mhm.
the people who, in 1941, put together Universal's Wolfman borrowed this story.
Okay.
This is where silver bullets become cemented into werewolf lore. Only in
Okay.
1941, Wolfman, directed by George Wagner. The film kind of makes it a modern culture piece of this legend.
Wow.
That is
That's so
interesting.
recent.
Yeah.
It's very recent.
I would have thought it went way further back.
Well,
Yeah,
people
I mean,
simply didn't have silver. Like, it just
Well,
wasn't
no.
around. And
I mean, it
obviously guns
totally
weren't a
makes
thing right
sense.
away either. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. You just never really think about that.
That is wild. Yeah, you're right. You wouldn't really think about that. And I mean, granted, we can go into the whole alchemy part of it, but it's interesting that they chose silver as the pure part of it. I wonder why. I mean, for the purity of it, I would always honestly assume that gold would be more pure than,
It was rarer and
you
softer.
know.
Silver's a harder metal.
Mm,
I mean,
Okay.
even if you buy some gold jewelry, you can like press an indentation into it.
No, that's true. You're right. Good point. You really wouldn't shoot
Yeah,
anybody with that.
well, no.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense.
That does make sense.
So you'd have to, if you wanted to use gold as a weapon, I'm sure people have. I'm almost positive that it's a thing that somebody has done. You would definitely have to make a metal that was mixed with something else, some kind of a composite.
Right.
I do know when we were in Iraq and they seized the AK-47s that Saddam had, I know that he had to keep them very, very away from everything because they would just scratch and get destroyed, and they were more,
Were they all gold?
Yeah, they were complete gold.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
they may have been plated, I'm sure.
The only thing I heard about was the golden toilet.
Yes, there was that too.
Stuff
I
like
do
that.
remember that, which I'm
Yeah.
sure is plated too. So
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, because real solid gold wouldn't really be a suitable toilet.
No, it wouldn't.
Mm-mm.
No. No.
Anyway,
But the
just
human
things I think
ego.
of.
Yeah. So I'm going to step sideways for a legend from Lincoln County in Missouri.
Okay.
Nice.
This is the Werewolf of Sugar Creek.
Okay.
Do you know the story?
No,
No,
actually,
but
I do
I don't
not.
think I know where Sugar Creek is.
I did look at it
Lincoln?
on a map. It's not super close to you, but closer than Arizona.
Well said.
Yeah. So that said, there are multiple local witnesses to this story. The first was a woman named Lily who really enjoyed going for walks at the Sugar Creek Park. There are cliffs there that sort of walk. You can walk above Sugar Creek and look down. And she liked to go there after a long day and just watch the sunset. So she happened to be there a little late one day, and she heard something coming through the woods, and it was kind of like a spidey sense moment where she was like, something doesn't feel right. I don't know what this is. So she hid behind a tree, and then she peeked out and saw in the water, and she didn't know if it was fishing or bathing, a half wolf, half man.
Whoa.
She described it as she watched it walk out of the woods on all fours, but then stand up on its back two legs and walk into the water. It seemed to be splashing water on itself, and she said it was at least 7 feet tall. But
Jeez.
then
Mm.
it started sniffing in the air and looked right towards her. So it was able to, like any canine, smell her
Yeah.
downwind and see her. Now, she did have a pistol with her because she was a woman going alone into the woods. And she did pull it out and fired 2 rounds at the creature. It fell down and then jumped up out of the creek bed. It howled upward, like in the true werewolf's fashion, and then sort of limpingly ran away.
Wow.
Whoa.
So the reporter who wrote the story said that he kind of filed this away and thought, I'm not going to write this yet. I'm going to hold on to it because this seems outrageous. And then he got a story from a man named Bill. This man also it was a retired guy who liked to gather rocks and fossils, like as a hobby. And he liked to go to Sugar Creek because he thought it was a good spot to collect specimens. It was starting to get dark. The story is extremely similar. And he heard a wolf howling, and he knew there were no wolves in Missouri. That was like not a thing. And he looked up and realized the moon was full. So he heard footsteps coming right towards him. And so he lay down flat in some brush and weeds to hide. He peeked out and could see a huge man wolf, upright creature, walking on its hind legs, jump into the creek. I guess this creature loves to bathe or fish or whatever it's doing.
Wow.
And again, he said that it was just kind of like splashing around. He wasn't sure if it was grabbing at fish or just bathing or cooling off. Then it finished after like 10, 15 minutes, got up and ran off. So it didn't find Bill. And when the reporter, whose name was Norm McFadden, went to investigate at Sugar Creek, he camped overnight. And he said all night he got the sensation, as he sat at his tent, he went on the night of a full moon, that he was being watched. But he went in and zipped his tent shut and went to sleep. And he said overnight he kept hearing occasional growls and what sounded like fast movement outside. So he got up before sunrise, and it was completely quiet. And he started looking around for evidence of what might have been. And he believes that what was around his tent was wild dogs, because there were a lot of footprints, not just one set, and they were all like sets of 4 walking around.
Okay.
So it doesn't sound like Lily or Bill saw wild dogs, but
No.
the reporter Norm definitely sounds like he saw a pack of either dogs or coyotes.
Yeah,
Right.
coyotes.
Probably coyotes for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I have a lot of those here.
Lots.
Oh, yeah.
Which is surprising, being from Arizona. I would have never suspected it. You know, you run into coyotes all the time back in Arizona, but coming out here to Missouri, I guess that kind of surprised me just how many
Oh, there's a
are
lot.
out
Yeah.
here.
Oh, yeah.
Hmm.
They're everywhere, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're even in Washington, D.C. They've become like problematic in parks in Washington, D.C.
Really?
that.
Wow.
Wow.
Yep, because there's so many of them, they have no natural predator.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
So I'm going to jump back into the werewolf's roots in, I don't want to linger here too long, but I want to hit a few spots in the mythology. So the
Okay.
Epic of Gilgamesh is the first written literature that humanity has, and it dates back to around 2000 BC. And there's no direct reference to a werewolf specifically, because that word didn't exist yet. But Ishtar, the goddess of love, turns her lover into a wolf. So this is the first written human-animal transformation, and it was recorded in this book very, very early in time. So then coming forward, in Greece, the story of Lycaon, the king who gave lycanthropy its name. This is around 430 BC or so-ish. So he was the king of Arcadia in Greece, and he was not the best guy. And Zeus hears that this guy is super bad news and goes to check it out. So he arrives in disguise, Zeus does, as a regular person. And Lycaon's like, I'm going to see. This guy's claiming he's Zeus, but he doesn't look like it. I'm going to see. So to trick Zeus, he slaughters someone. Now, there are different stories. Some say he slaughtered his own son, and others say he slaughtered a random prisoner from his jail. But then he had his chefs prepare this human person and serve it to Zeus as a meal. And Zeus realizes what he's done and is not happy. This is the beginning also of the werewolf as cannibal. Which is a major theme later on. And Zeus is so furious that he turns Lycaon into a wolf and burns down his palace. So that is the first story of that type. But there's no back and forth with this or with the story from Ishtar. They're just permanently changed.
Permanently, yeah.
Interesting.
So in Rome, I'm still in Greece. Herodotus wrote about a tribe from Eastern Europe who turn into wolves once a year for several days. And this is also around 430, 440 BC. And this is one of the first groups of bloodlines that are werewolves. Now, Rome, Petronius, not Patronus, but Petronius, is a werewolf story. And this begins the story of the moon. There is a man who witnesses a transformation of someone from human to wolf under the light of the full moon. And that is the beginning of that.
Wow.
Now, I wanted to address Beowulf because so many people ask me about it in the werewolf lore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Beowulf does not have a werewolf. Period. Grendel is a horrific creature. And you could draw a parallel between Grendel, who is a monster, and a werewolf, but he lives on the fringes of society. He's like kind of a beast, kind of a man. He's very untamed. He's savage. He's an outcast. He is descended from Cain, but and also Grendel's mother was played by Angelina Jolie, I think, in the last.
I remember that.
Yeah. So Beowulf has they have a supernatural thing, but he does not transform from a wolf to a person. There is no transformation. So Beowulf is not technically a werewolf story, although it's frequently lumped into the werewolf history.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I actually think of Beowulf and I think of werewolves, so that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I can see where that I was in error.
Well, like I said, I mean, there are parallels between Grendel and a werewolf. It's just not quite the same.
Right.
But
Right.
it's still a great story. All right. Coming forward in time, werewolves become the romantic object of stories. Now we're in the 1300s. So we're before the witch craze. Remember that in time.
Yes.
Bisclaver is a medieval long poem written by Marie de France, and it is the story of a nobleman who secretly transforms into a werewolf and is betrayed by his wife. So, they get married, and she notices that 3 days out of the month he's gone, and he doesn't take any clothes. And she's kind of like, I think you have a mistress. And he finally tells her, like, I don't have a mistress, I'm a werewolf. She's not super thrilled about it and decides to plot against him. And she has a lover on the side, some knight. So this is going downhill for the werewolf, right?
Right.
Here's the sympathetic werewolf all over the place.
Right.
The woman gets her knight lover to, follow him and change or take his clothes. This is his magic. His clothes are the magic.
Okay.
The knight steals the clothes, and Bisclaver is trapped in his wolf form permanently, and he just disappears into the wilderness, and he's declared dead, and his wife marries her boyfriend. Well,
Wow.
time goes on, and Bisclaver is approached by the king in the woods. He does not behave like a wild animal. He behaves like a respectful, intelligent creature. And the king decides to take him back to his court as a companion. Remember, wolves were also the origin of our dogs, too.
Yep.
So at court, Bisclaver lives on, and then one day her wife and her now husband come to visit. And this usually calm and totally awesome wolf freaks out, attacks them, and bites off his wife's nose. The king senses that something's going on, and he investigates and learns that the whole story. And he forces her to get back the clothes, which I guess for some reason she hung on to. I had questions
That's kind of
about
weird.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't think that. Yeah.
that. I would have been like, "That's been burned." But
Yeah.
all of that said, he is restored to his human form, and the wife and her lover are exiled, and all of their descendants are born without noses as a sign of their betrayal.
Oh, jeez.
That sucks.
Man.
Right? I was like, I also have questions about that.
Right.
But, yeah.
Genetic defect, or you got your nose
magic.
bit off by magic.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'd give him the clothes back because then you're just dealing with a werewolf that could come kill you.
That's true. Yeah, you would hope that.
Like, I'd rather him be in human form and be ticked off than be in the other form.
Right?
I mean, how do you hand those clothes back? You'd be like, no hard feelings, okay? Here you go.
Clothes.
Clothes. Wow.
Yeah, like I said, a lot of questions about the logic in some of these old stories, but
Right. But they're
fun,
fun.
though, yeah.
They're fun.
they are really fun. So now I'm going to step into history and talk about Berserkers very briefly. They were fierce warriors. They were Viking warriors, and they're linked to werewolves because of the transformation, the trance-like state they entered into before battle. This is the origin of the warrior werewolf story.
Okay.
So it is said that they had several different systems they would use, but they would don cloaks made of either wolf skins or bear skins, and they would spiritually take on the energy of those animals. Excuse me. It's the wolf skins were called, I'm going to try to say this word correctly, Ulfanar. They were the wolf coats. And if you know someone out there who speaks Norse, feel free to correct me. But it basically was a change in their mind. And they became fierce warriors. They could create chaos, destruction, untamed power. They just sort of lost their humanity when they went into battle. They said they went into frenzies, and they could fight like wolves or bears.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure exactly if there was any supernatural component to this, because some people say there was, that they were able to channel the animals' spirits as they made this transformation, which is how it's gotten linked into the werewolf story.
Right.
Yeah. It also is because I am a nerd and, I'm into comics and stuff like that.
Yes.
Wolverine.
Yes.
Wolverine, his character actually has a berserker frenzy. So when he gets super pissed, he starts, and they call that his berserker frenzy. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, that's really cool. You always wonder, Stan Lee and people like that, if they knew this lore and said, hey,
sure.
let's
I'm sure.
let's bring that in.
Whether they're doing the research themselves or they have people to do it, I'm sure that's a thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So
and my daughter will be very happy I brought that up.
Yeah.
She's a big MCU person.
That's awesome. So there are suggestions, we can't prove this one way or the other, that berserkers may have taken mushrooms to go into this state.
Okay.
Some historians say yes, some say no, others are like, we can't prove it either way. But it would explain a lot of the behavior.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the whole term berserker means completely irrational
to
and
go berserk.
Yeah, to go berserk. So, I mean, you would automatically assume somebody who shrooms out and does that sort of thing, I would have no idea, may have that detachment from reality.
Right. They were said to become impervious to pain, like they would be seen biting their own shields. They would sometimes accidentally attack their allies. It was almost like they had lost touch with their humanity, so to speak.
Yeah.
Just like the werewolf story.
Yeah.
So coming forward in time, we're going to talk about werewolves and witches. And you know this is a subject near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
Of course, yes.
This is a super interesting twist on the witchcraft story. So we're going to say witch hunts went on roughly from the 15th to the 18th century, right? In Europe. And witches were kind of like threats to the social order, like in the mind of people. I mean, maybe not really, but in the mind of people. And there was a hysteria around it. Well, werewolves were attached to that. So there was a gender line. Men could be killed as witches, but it was more common in France and Germany and Switzerland and parts of Scandinavia, where wolves were predators, for a man to be killed as a werewolf.
Interesting.
So there were shared themes between witchcraft and werewolves. They were believed to have the ability to transform. Now remember, werewolves were men that could transform into wolves or werewolves, and witches were often thought to be able to transform into cats.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Which is why we had to kill thousands of cats right before the Black Plague arrived. So they would both be searched for things like the devil's mark, which could be literally any mark on your body.
Yeah. Birthmark, yeah.
Yeah, birthmark, even a bug bite, a mole.
You got a skin tag.
Yeah, a blemish. Yeah. There you are. You've got it. You're aligned with the devil. And so werewolves had them too. And this was a sign of a pact with the devil that you traded for supernatural abilities. Okay. During the height of witch craze, there were lots of accusations of werewolfism, and they were accused of killing people, making chaos, eating livestock, things like that. Now, could real wolves have been responsible for some of that? I mean, yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Sure. Of course.
100%.
I mean, that's kind of their thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So France was one of the epicenters of werewolf trials, and there were lots of high-profile cases there. One was the werewolf of Dole. Gilles Garnier was a French hermit, and he was accused of attacking and eating children. Several people claimed to have seen him in his wolf form, and sadly, Mr. Garnier was burned at the stake. Yes. Jean Garnier in 1603 was a teenager from Bordeaux, and he claimed to have been initiated into a cult of werewolves and was allegedly eating children. They decided, though, that he was mentally ill, and he was sentenced to life in a monastery.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah. Now,
no help. Just go to a monastery.
Interestingly enough, Grenier, the second gentleman, was claiming to be using a magic lotion, kind of like that witch's flying ointment,
Mm.
That he said that was what was helping him transform into the wolf so that he could eat the children.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay,
There
I
you go.
gotcha.
Yep.
Yep.
So Germany had a lot of trials as well. They had a lot of werewolf trials. One was a woman, actually. Helena, I'm going to say her last name wrong. No disrespect intended. I just don't know how to say it. Schönborn was accused of witchcraft and werewolfism. And, of course, she died. Yeah, they killed her.
Big surprise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
shocking. Switzerland in the Valais region was a hotspot for werewolf trials in the 1400s. They also had some of the earliest witch trials in Europe. They believed there that people made pacts with the devil to transform into wolves, and that the devil would give them the magic salve or lotion. There we are again with that
okay.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Scandinavia, Finland had a kind of different take on werewolves. They believed that shamans from some of the native tribes had the ability to turn into wolves or bears as part of their spiritual practice. But when Christianity arrives, that's demonized. And so those people have to die.
Well,
Wow.
That's typical.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're like, that
Another
sounds
big
right.
shocker there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that one about a million times.
Yeah.
Yep. A lot of cannibalism was associated with werewolves. And now you have to also remember that real wolves would eat their own because they're opportunistic. And
Yeah.
a lot of these confessions were made under serious torture. They really only stopped with the witches and the werewolves when the age of reason hits, the Enlightenment, and the scientific method is born. Then all these superstitions are kind of like, oh, meh, we're not on that anymore.
Yeah. We've evolved a little.
It's like, oops, our bad. Sorry about those thousands of people that died.
Yeah. Oh man, that is so unnerving, but it's so it's so known to have happened in history that you just shake your head and go, if we only knew then what we knew today.
Well, it's just crazy to me. Like even with the witches, if you didn't admit it, then you were a witch and you have to die. But if you do admit it, like that one case, oh well, you're just insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, sometimes people admitted it and they were killed anyway.
Yeah.
Well, it just seemed like
that was also an outcome.
So you just you don't know which way to roll the dice.
Yeah, there's just an insane bloodlust to do terrible things to people.
Yeah, well, fear is a powerful motivator. It really is.
100%.
So
absolutely,
people will do the strangest things under the influence of fear, and fear by its very nature is irrational.
It is. And the fear causes all kinds of different things like these, like, you know, in that case where they kind of coerced a confession, you know, if you scare somebody enough, you'd be surprised at things you'll get them to do and say.
Oh, yeah, of course. So I'm going to jump to another local legend. This one comes from Pennsylvania. It's called Shock Cemetery. It's from the 1790s, and in a town called Marietta along Old River Road. You know it's good, right? Because it's Old River Road.
Yes, Old River Road.
Right. If it was New River Road, wouldn't be that
No,
good.
that would not be interesting. Is the Shock burial ground. And on the outside of the wall, it says, within this God's acre rest the descendants of Hans Graf. So Hans Graf was a Swiss immigrant. He was one of the first settlers of Lancaster County, which everybody knows from the Amish. He was not Amish. There are 30 grave markers there. Many of them are destroyed over time, crumbled, just unreadable. And there's a stone wall around it with no gate. This is a super interesting thing. Because not having a gate implies there's some reason that you don't want anybody to get in or out.
Right.
When I heard about it, my first thought was, oh, somebody was accused of witchcraft. But I could find no evidence of that at all. None. And then I found all of these stories. One tale says there's a phantom dog that appears on the full moon. Or, if you enter the walls of the cemetery, a large black dog or a wolf will appear and start barking at you. I can confirm that doesn't happen. It didn't happen to me. But the other more fascinating legend is that Hans himself was killed by a werewolf, and it cursed his family bloodline, which is why they all had to be buried in this plot that was sealed off.
Okay.
But I couldn't obviously find any journals or anything to really substantiate that either. And it turns out that Hans Graf himself is buried somewhere else. He's not even buried there. Yeah.
Wow.
That didn't work out.
No. So I love this little cemetery. It's very mysterious. It's a beautiful little slice of somebody's family history.
Mhm.
And I did find it to be a BYOW situation. You have to bring your own werewolf.
Gotcha.
Because when I went there, I was shared a little bit of this earlier. I was super excited to dive into this story. I tried everything. I walked around it 7 times. I, howled. Nothing happened. But we did bring along a werewolf type dog, and we brought him in. We lifted him over this giant wall and brought him into the cemetery, and he did look good there. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
It looked good.
Yeah.
He was cool. But aside from bringing our own werewolf, me and my friend could not find any other werewolf evidence there, even
Mhm.
on a full moon. But it is a great story, and it is a fascinating thing that it is a sealed off cemetery.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll ever find out why, but it's an interesting mystery.
How tall is the stone wall? Is it like
It varies on where you approach it. Some places
Okay.
it's impassable because it's so high. Other places it's only like 3 feet and you can hop over because it's on an incline.
And what
Okay.
did you say? What kind of stone it was? Did I miss that?
It's like granite. It's like big stone block.
Because I'm thinking if it's to keep in werewolves, they're going to jump over that.
Yep.
Right.
But then if it's so short, I mean, any person could get over it too. So
That's fascinating. Honestly, I've never heard of such a thing. That is really,
that's different.
yeah. There obviously it was with intent. So you're
Right.
right. What were they doing? I mean, what were they
What was
trying to
the
keep out
purpose?
or in?
Right. Exactly.
Could it be possible that part of the stone wall has fallen off and it was all the same size at some point? Or can you tell that it was.
Well, the top is all there. It's just
Okay.
I think over time the ground has changed in the past over
Sure.
200
Yeah.
years. So it
Yeah,
may have been
erosion.
taller at one time.
That's what I'm thinking to keep anyone from getting in
That's fast. But
or getting
still,
out.
That's just fascinating.
But if you're a werewolf, I think you can probably jump over that.
So yeah, that's
Well,
the thing.
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
to me, this just screams witchcraft. And
Mhm.
the minute I saw it, I was like, oh, somebody in the family, somebody thought they were a witch. But I
Yeah.
found nothing about that. All I found were all these old werewolf stories. But as we just went through, werewolves and witches have been linked a long time, and these were immigrants from countries that had these legends.
Yeah.
So
Well, granite is one of those stones that's, if I'm not wrong, like quartz where it can record.
absolutely.
There's some knowledge behind that. So I guess if you go through the long windy road about, paranormal stuff that happens and you're, like, it's recording or maybe trying to keep out certain elements from the grave sites
That could be
or
too.
keep in. Right. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's interesting though, man. I've never heard of such a thing. That is really cool.
It is, and it's like I said, there's a tranquility to the place. Like I didn't experience fear there. But I mean, as the two of you know me, I'm not superstitious and
Right.
I have a very high threshold for fear. So
Yeah.
I don't go into a place and scare myself, you know?
Mhm.
I'm a little stitious, but it's usually just from like I think it's probably I have some things that I think are just in my wheelhouse of just scaring the crap out of me. Other than that, I do okay.
Yeah.
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 Well, anyway, I wanted to get into a few scientific theories very quickly of what
Sure.
werewolves could be. The first is clinical lycanthropy. This is an actual medical condition. And when people are affected by clinical lycanthropy, they believe they can transform into a wolf or another animal. Now, this is considered to be a psychiatric disorder. This is like a diagnosable
Okay.
psychiatric disorder. And
Okay.
it's in the same family as like schizophrenia.
Okay.
It is believed to be a delusional misidentification syndrome, and it can be treated. So historically, if people had this, people would have, said, "Oh, it's a supernatural thing," or they're actually aligned with a demon or something. Nowadays, they are treated with antipsychotics, mood stabilizers, and probably psychotherapy.
Yeah.
So it is rare; it doesn't happen a lot, but it is a thing that happens. So there was a king of France known as Charles the Mad.
Nice.
Who
There's a title.
Yeah, right. Charles the Mad
Yeah.
found a boy in the woods who was suffering from what we now know to be clinical lycanthropy. and his name was Pierre. They called him Pierre the Wild, and they Charles liked him so much he kept him as a pet.
Hmm.
Oh, wow.
So he kept a pet human,
Wow.
and made people believe he was a pet werewolf, even though this was actually a very sick young man, and he didn't live a
Yeah.
long life. But he, like I said, when Charles the Mad found him, Charles VI, he brought him home and kept him as a pet werewolf, which is kind of a sad and horrific thing.
That's really sad.
You got to think of people who were like witnessing that.
Yeah,
know?
well, you probably
Well,
don't want
obviously
to
it's-
argue with the king, you know?
Right.
No,
No.
that's the thing, is they got away with doing whatever
Everything.
they wanted.
King
Everything.
comes in with some like kid and like, yeah, here's a werewolf, and they're like, yes, absolutely, you're right. And then
Yes,
they go back
yes, Your
home and
Highness.
like,
Yes, my
yeah,
liege.
yes, Your Highness.
Yeah.
Yeah, go back and be like, that dude's lost his freaking mind.
Well, most of them were like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Back in
not the
history.
best scenario. There are a few other scientific possibilities behind the werewolf phenomenon. One is werewolf syndrome, which is a genetic mutation where people grow excessive hair.
The hair.
Polyphoria, which is a disorder that causes excessive hair growth, red and brown teeth, and nocturnal wandering. Rabies.
Really?
Rabies could have easily been confused for werewolfism in the past.
Sure.
Because think of
Could
it,
see
both humans and wolves can get it. And the most surprising one to me was food poisoning from various grains. Apparently, there was a mold that people had not yet recognized historically, and it would cause hallucinations and severe illness.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
that was another possibility, scientifically speaking,
Yeah.
behind werewolf activity.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I mean that you look at some of those and you go, okay, that absolutely makes sense.
yeah,
But it still doesn't explain some of the
it doesn't explain everything,
yeah,
and I
right.
don't think
No.
it could, but it does
Right.
explain some of it.
Sure.
Yes. Yes.
Absolutely. And that's a good thing about science. It'll get you
So far.
so far, but sometimes there's so many different things that can't actually be explained.
It's true.
Yeah.
So as we come forward into the 1800s, we hit the Gothic period. And of course, everybody loves the Gothic period because
Yes.
it's sort of fascinating and macabre, and the supernatural is celebrated, and people explore their fear. And this becomes a great time for werewolves, because you have things out of this period like Jekyll and Hyde, which is
Right.
the ultimate story of transformation, right?
Mhm.
And but I would say Mr. Hyde is a monster of science, personally.
Mhm.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
But yeah, suddenly literature is known for having dark and eerie settings, dark forests, moody landscapes, and we get Dracula and Frankenstein, both out of this period. And just a little bit after that, we get The Werewolf by Clemence Hausmann, which tells the story of a female werewolf who terrorizes a village.
Hmm.
I love this because
Nice.
I feel like the she-wolf is deeply underrepresented in all categories. And I do think that in Victorian literature, this kind of is a great way that the werewolf brings the romanticism of, the whole time period, the Gothic movement alive. So the whole repressed desires of the Victorian woman, how could it be better than a werewolf, a she-wolf?
Right.
That's pretty cool. And you always wonder, obviously there's always a big, male proponent to so many of these stories, but
Yeah.
you think about as far as archetype,
Mhm.
the werewolf being female would be, I mean, that's really cool, like, to be able to see that archetype in a female.
Yes.
Because of the fact that, it's the mysteriousness behind it and everything, I'm just tired of watching guys do everything all the time. Because that stuff, so
Well,
it's kind of cool to think of.
I mean,
yeah.
I pulled a few of my favorite werewolf books, but one of my favorites, and I do highly recommend it, is She-Wolf. And this is about the female werewolf as an archetype. And
Okay.
it's just not something that most people think of. There's a
Yeah.
couple of good movies like Ginger Snaps that are about female werewolves, but for the most part, it's, a wolf man. Or even if we're going to say dog man, it's dog man.
Right.
Where's
Yeah.
the female of the species?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, unless
That's
they're
true.
genetically modified and genetically grown,
Right?
there's going to have to be,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a
Yep.
species.
And I'll
So
send you
it's
this later too, but this is a great primer on werewolves if anybody's interested. The Werewolf Handbook. I've
Okay.
probably
okay.
read this twice. I love it. It's a great quick
I like the
read.
cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a
Cover's really
well-produced
cool.
little book. Very nice to look at and
Okay.
read.
Oh, nice.
So I could send you
That's
both of those
cool.
titles to add to your show
Yeah,
notes.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So let me move quickly into the future, because I don't want to take up too much more than my hour. The Wolfman came out in 1941. It was directed by George Wagner and starred Lon Chaney Jr. And it was an iconic movie. I mean, first of all, it's one of
Yes.
the Universal monsters,
Hmm.
right?
Mhm.
The Wolfman. At the
That's right.
time, if you look at it now, it looks a little hokey, but the transformation scenes were groundbreaking back then. There was
Right.
no makeup like that before that. The makeup artist's name was Jack Pierce, and it was like amazing. People were absolutely terrified when they saw this
Mhm.
film. And Lon Chaney Jr. really did deliver a memorable performance. He made the monster tragic. He made the curse emotional. Like you felt bad for the werewolf,
Yep.
you know?
Mhm.
He
Yeah.
really struggled with his darker aspects as a wolf versus a human, and it made the movie really special in the pantheon of the Universal monsters. So, I mean, I watched it in film school. You know, it
Yeah.
was great, and we wouldn't have like Twilight and Teen Wolf and Underworld and the Wednesday monsters without this movie. It just simply wouldn't have happened.
That's
It's
right.
true.
Yep.
So,
Yeah. That
go ahead.
I was just saying I do remember that pretty well, the Lon Chaney, and
Hmm.
I remember my dad showing it to me. I was pretty young when I watched it, and even in let's say early '80s. I mean, yeah, granted there was stuff that was much more, scary, but you still were a little bit, especially as a young person when you watch that change, you're like, whoa.
Yep.
I mean, it was still kind of ahead of its time for being when it was.
It was great. It was great.
Yeah.
And like I said, I remember watching it in film school, and the story of it is was well done. And if you put
Hmm.
it in context of the history of movies, it was great.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So
That
I
was.
promised earlier I would point out some of the other beasts from around the world. Africa has were hyenas. They are
Mm.
generally considered malevolent creatures.
Okay.
All over Africa, they are believed to be either a human that transforms into a hyena or a hyena
Hmm.
that can transform into a human.
Interesting.
And it's never for good reasons. They're usually
Yeah.
tied to curses or witchcraft, or sorcerers, and they usually prey on other humans. The long and short of it is that they tend to be grave robbers or into cannibalism, kind of like this running theme we've had.
Mhm.
But the were hyena wants to eat human flesh, either by preying on the living or digging up graves to eat the dead.
Mm.
Yikes.
Then we move into the legend
Yeah.
of the were-cat. There are a lot of were-cats. There are so many. Because even witches in Europe could transform into cats, allegedly. But
Mhm.
Africa has were-cats. Let's see. Central America in Aztec and Maya cultures, they had shamans that could turn and shapeshift into jaguars. So where
Hmm.
jaguars were a thing. Um, Asia, in Japanese mythology, there are supernatural cats that shapeshift into a human form. They are yokai, kind of malevolent. They're looking to do bad
Mhm.
things. And then, of course, India has were tigers. South America and Brazil, they have more were jaguars and a were ocelot,
Hmm.
which sounds,
Interesting.
I mean, it probably is not cute, but it sounds really cute to me.
Right.
Ocelots are cool.
They
Yeah.
That'd
are.
be interesting to
Yeah.
see. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
then from there, I wanted to share one last regional werewolf story. It is the story in Maryland of the Dwyo. So, in the woods of Maryland, there's a werewolf creature that has dark fur and a long, bushy tail and a long snout. It's 6 or 7 feet tall, and it has a mortal enemy that is a flying dragon beast called the Snallygaster.
Wow.
Maryland has that too. So,
Okay.
Nice.
Dwyer was first written about in 1944, and he makes a loud screaming sound. And people have found his footprints. He has been written about in several newspapers, and apparently there's been a lot of sightings of him that have appeared in papers like the Frederick News Post. So hunters see him more than anybody else. which is probably not surprising because they're out in the woods, but they're
Sure.
always very specific that it is not a Bigfoot, that it is a wolf man creature, and he's always out at night.
Hmm.
So there was a theory that this could be a Hexen wolf. So the Pennsylvania Dutch are quite close to this part of Maryland. Pennsylvania Dutch also settled in some of the same counties. And a Hexen wolf does not transform through their own magic like a werewolf, but somebody else turns them. So this is an
Okay.
old
Okay.
German story.
Like a
but
hex.
Yeah.
Yes, just like that.
Okay.
A hex.
Okay.
But the story kind of fizzled that it was a Hexen wolf, and they went back to it just being Dwyo. I don't know who named it Dwyo. I could not find that, but it's certainly interesting. But I can tell you that students at Frederick Community College organized a Dwyo hunt. 100 students signed up, and the night came, and they all decided that it must be a wolfhound that somebody let loose, and they all decided they were too scared to go hunt for it in the middle of the night.
That's funny.
So, as a side note, the Snallygaster is a flying dragon with tentacles that came to Maryland from Germany with colonists and apparently lived there for a very long time. Even one of our former presidents was going to go hunt it. The Smithsonian Institution offered money for anybody that could kill the Snallygaster and produce its hide. But as far
Really?
as I know, nobody has caught it yet. So, but yes,
It's just
this
a cool
this
name.
werewolf and this flying dragon just hate each other.
It's like Mothra, and
Yeah.
just think of like the
Yep.
old school movies. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So yeah, my last thought for you all is that werewolves remain popular over so much time in history, like all of humanity, because they sort of represent the human dual nature. Like we all have the side of us that's rational and civilized, and then we all have a side of us that wants like the freedom and the primal instinct, to follow our desires. And
Right.
they also show transformation, and we all go through transformations in our life in one way or another. They symbolize the fear of what we can't control, and
Yeah.
everybody experiences that fear. They are part of the tragic hero story. So everybody has felt some kind of empathy for a werewolf character, whether it was in Twilight or Wednesday or
Right.
one of the older classic stories. You feel for the werewolf that doesn't know who they're attacking or doesn't want to be a werewolf or doesn't want to be a
Right.
monster. And
Right.
there's something in that everybody can relate to, because all of us have the capacity to be a monster. And all of us
Yeah.
want to believe that we could suppress it if the opportunity was in front of us to be a monster. So I think that, I mean, these aren't the only reasons, but I feel like the fact that werewolves have been with us through poetry and storytelling and novels and movies and now video games and comics and, role-playing games, the werewolf myth endures. It is just part of the human condition, in my opinion.
That's perfect.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I mean I think that's 100. I mean, you can't really top it any better.
No,
Than that.
no.
Oh wow. Well, that is
There's a lot more
that's
history.
a lot more than I thought. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is so
And that's
good.
not everything by a long stretch.
No, yeah, I would
That's great.
imagine so. I mean, there's such a rich history. It just you always think of, like I said, the same classic, wolf man, and the werewolves, but with any of those stories, they're rooted in something, and there's always some kind of lore behind it. But yeah, what a great hour. I didn't know that much about it for sure.
No, I didn't either.
Rissa, you don't disappoint.
No.
Well, thank you.
Never do.
Oh man. Well, listen. I know this is busy season. What do you got going on?
Oh my gosh, I am giving talks. I am doing so many ghost tours. I'm doing ghost tours in both Ellicott City, Maryland and York, PA. A lot of my talks are already sold out because I'm doing a lot of witch history talks this time of year. And I think all but one of them is fully sold out already, which is great.
Oh, wow.
I really love putting history out there as a way to dispel
Yeah.
superstition. So
Sure.
I am doing my History of Superstitions talk, and I'm doing my Victorian Gothic talk this fall. So I'm excited about those.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Well, to our audience, anybody and anywhere that can get to Rissa where she's at, and if it's not sold out, which is a good problem to have,
Yeah.
it's going to be a good time. So, Rissa, thank you so much again for coming in and being our new resident historian and getting us squared away, and then eventually doing vampires, which apparently I dropped the ball. I thought we had. I don't know why.
No, we haven't.
Well, I would love to do
Yeah.
vampires or banshees or whatever you think would be the most interesting history to share, because I love it
Well,
all.
We will definitely have you back,
Or
for
maybe both.
any of it,
Maybe both.
and all of it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and we look forward to talking to you soon.
Alrighty, you take care.
You too. She just does not disappoint.
Never.
I mean, it's just the wealth of knowledge. There's a reason why she's our
Historian.
resident historian. It's just she's able to bring all that together, and we got some really great information. And again, you know, definitely at a disadvantage. I didn't know a whole lot about it other than
No,
what,
I
you
didn't
know.
either. And I didn't realize it went back so far in history.
Yeah, or that it was such an integral part of our entire history and humanity.
Well, yeah. And we did, the Michigan Dogman episode. And we covered like one of those things.
Yeah.
The Jedburg
No, the
thing.
Bedburg, Jedburg.
Jedburg, Bedburg.
It's like
Some-
Jed.
Something Berg.
Jed is a millionaire. Anyway,
It was
Yeah.
one of those Bergs.
yeah, it's a burg somewhere. I think it was London, actually, or like in Europe somewhere.
It was Germany.
Was it Germany? That's right.
Yeah. But he was attacking the livestock, remember?
I do remember that.
Yeah. Oh, that was a long time ago. We
Yeah.
talked about that. So it's been a while.
It has been a while. Yeah. No, guys.
But yeah,
listen-
I don't know how you would distinguish between the two.
no. And first of all, why would you? Here's my point. If you run
If you
across
see
it,
something, it can
Yeah.
call itself whatever it
Yeah.
wants to call it.
it's like one of those where you're like, I don't care what you call it. I'm getting the hell out of here because.
What's a little frightening, though, is that there's some been spotted in Missouri
Yeah, I know.
where we
Yeah.
live. So that's a little creepy.
Between that
honestly.
and the Ozark Howler and all these other things.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's why people don't go out into the woods.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good thing we don't live anywhere near it. Anyway, but no, guys, seriously, it was a good time. I hope you guys had a good time as well. Let us know. What do you think? What's your opinion on werewolves? What with the folklore and all the different things that
Or is
were
it just something made up?
Yeah, or is it made up?
I don't know. This is one of the ones that I think it's hard for me to believe the werewolf thing.
Yeah,
At least the part of something of a human changing into a werewolf and changing back.
right.
That's where I have the problem. Not that something like that couldn't exist,
Yeah,
but the transformation back and forth.
sure. And I also think that a lot of these people she even talked about it were kind of probably on drugs.
Yeah.
For lack of better words, I mean, there's some possibility that people hallucinated some of this stuff, and I mean, it just is what it is.
But then the sightings of the hybrid looking
Yeah.
thing, that I don't know.
It
It's
w-
the first time I've heard that actually.
As with anything we cover, I mean, there's so much, so much gray area, for lack of better words. So, yeah, guys, what do you think? Hit us up, info@gxparanormal.com, or in the show notes or the comments or any of those.
Mhm.
But other than that, guys, I hope you had a good time. And with that,
We're gonna go feed our little wolves.
Yeah,
who are
as a matter of
currently
fact-
staring me down right now.
yeah, speaking of Beowulf, but anyway, guys, you have a great time, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.